My name is Heston Blumenthal, and for 3 years running, my restaurant has had 3 Michelin stars and been voted one of the top 2 in the world. For the last 6 months, my research team and I have scoured the globe to perfect 8 classic dishes. They might seem complex recipes, but they all contain elements you can and should try at home. It's been fun. It's been challenging. I actually don't know whether to laugh or cry. And at times, downright bizarre. But then perfection never comes easily. In this week's programme, I resurrect Baked Alaska, a fusion of hot and cold that was the height of sweet sophistication in the 1970s.
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Do you know what Baked Alaska is?
Baked
Alaska.
that fish.
It's like a meringue casing with ice cream in the middle.
It is ice cream.
With meringue on the top.
And it's baked.
Well, that's nearly right. It's an ice cream containing fruit on a sponge base, covered in warm meringue. In my quest to combine hot and cold, I rummage in the loft for insulation. Test ways to vacuum pack a meringue.
Ooh, dear me, now that's not going to happen.
And try to crack making hot ice cream.
It's hot on the outside.
And the inside's cold. You've got this flaming dessert that's cold in the centre. So this hot and cold thing was actually, thinking about it, the key part to Baked Alaska. And I wanted to try and accentuate the whole subject of contrast and extend it to other areas. The starting point for my journey was the birthplace of Baked Alaska, a restaurant called Delmonico's in New York. Delmonico's was America's first restaurant, and its head chef, Charles Ranhofer, created Baked Alaska, then known as Alaska, Florida, in 1867. Sitting under the watchful gaze of a stern-looking Ranhofer, in what felt more like a country house than a restaurant, I was looking forward to my first bite.
There you go, sir. Thank you. You're welcome.
Wow. It's got a really nice balance and the contrast, which I think is really important for this dish. There's ice cream and then the sponge base. You can see the fruit there. There were some contrasts, a few small textural differences, a slightly warmed and caramelised crust on the meringue, and a squidgy sponge base. Essentially, though, they were just different forms of soft. And I wanted to try and put something that was going to be more crisp in the cake. Back in my lab, the first contrast challenge was combining hot and cold. Time to test some insulation. Baked Alaska is all about insulation. The ice cream must stay cold while the meringue gets warm. I wanted to create a sponge base that would be as effective as loft insulation. We're starting off with 2 pieces of actual insulation, roof insulation.
This looks just like cake.
The test was simple. A disc of ice cream was placed on top of the insulation material, which was resting on a foil-covered beaker of boiling water. We then timed how long it took for the ice cream to melt.
This sounded a lot better on paper.
Actually, this is starting to go. I mean, you're starting to see it softening at the edge.
I reckon it could be more conclusive to compare the core temperatures of each ice cream.
Minus 6.5.
6.5 in that one.
Minus 5 in that one.
Yeah. I think it's quite clear that that is obviously better than that one. The first contender sponges were a densely crumbed pound cake on the right versus a light and airy chiffon on the left.
Minus
8.4.
So that is holding.
Yeah.
Pound cake.
It's pretty close.
It's pretty much the same, right? Minus 8. The other sponges we tested were super moist, gemoise, and a rich sponge. All of these sponges are pretty efficient at insulating. I mean, more efficient than the insulation material itself. What should be driving this forward is the flavour, the way the thing eats and how it's going to... I could choose any of the sponges we tested, as they were all good insulators. Now, the key thing about this sponge is lightness. But it's very important is whilst we want this to be really light, we don't want to lose the flavour. So this recipe is developed to get a cake that is both light but also tastes delicious. So the first thing is to make beurre noisette. Now, separate some eggs. What I'm doing here is actually we're using both the whites and the yolks. But again, because of the lightness that we want in the cake, we need to get as much air in as possible. So you can hear the sizzling and splitting, and that's the water contained in the butter basically boiling, coming to the surface. So just skim the froth that comes to the surface. That smells really nutty. So at this point it's ready. Pass it through a sieve to get rid of the other solid bits. So now what we're doing over here with the egg yolks is effectively making a mayonnaise. This butter's hot, so I'm going to cool it down just by adding a little bit of cold oil. And then just bit by bit add the butter and oil mixture to the egg yolks. The critical point is really at the beginning, get the oil emulsified. If you add too much at one go, you run the risk of it splitting. Next, I'm going to add some vegetable fats. Because if there's too much butter, it runs the risk of actually melting and splitting out before the cake's got time to cook, before the flour has got time to set the structure. So once that's emulsified and basically thickened like a mayonnaise, we need to chill it down. The reason for that is that this is all about getting in as much air as we possibly can. So this is the butter mayonnaise that's been in the fridge for 20 minutes. Let's go back into the bowl. Now change the whisk for the paddle, and the reason for that is we now need to be adding the dry ingredients. I'm using chlorinated flour. So the reason for using chlorinated flour is it enables you to put more sugar into the cake. So I'm just using caster sugar, some baking powder, and salt. And once all the dry ingredients have been sifted, we need to add them to our egg and butter mixture. After 15 seconds, add some milk and continue for another 30 seconds. Turn the machine up, full, and leave it for about 4 minutes. The batter should be completely smooth and homogeneous. Remove it from the bowl, and we now need to make meringue. You must make sure the mixing bowl is spotlessly clean before whisking the egg whites. Any fat left in the bowl will ruin the meringue. To the egg whites, add sugar and whisk to soft peaks. So the meringue's now nice and creamy. We've got to incorporate the flour, butter, mayonnaise mixture without losing air. You can actually see and feel this flour and fat mixture becoming lighter, almost mousse-like. Now we need to fold this back into the meringue. Work the spatula around the inside of the bowl, just lifting the mixture away from the sides. Don't beat it in, because you will knock some of the air out. Pour the mix into a floured cake tin and bake in the oven at 170 degrees for 20 minutes.